Hi, this is Lenusa talking about project management on YouTube, and in today's video I will tell you how you can optimize instant messaging communications on your project, program, portfolio, or even organization through probably the most popular tools out there, Microsoft Teams and Slack. I will also show you some examples from my own projects, and we'll try to map that info to PMBOK terms, so in case if you're getting ready for your PMP certification, this video should help you understand communication management piece a little bit better. But before we jump into specifics of Microsoft Teams or Slack functionality, let's try to understand what are the problems that we're trying to solve here. Well, the first one, as I'm a project manager, is too many communications. That's the biggest problem I have. These can be communications within the team, with other stakeholders in your organization, and external communications, for example, with clients. Remember the formula from our favorite book? If I have a team of 20 people, it leaves me with more than 190 potential communication channels if each starts talking to each. And it's only the internal team, but I have more stakeholders. Add them in and see how that number will grow. That's a lot. If not taken care of, properly planned and controlled, it can soon turn into chaos when no one is productive. Obviously, you can't just add everyone into a single messaging group because it will trigger enormous number of notifications. And if you ever been added into WhatsApp or Skype group, you get what I'm saying. If you ask a question there, you'll probably never get an answer because it will simply get lost among other millions of messages. That's why people usually end up turning off notifications for them completely. Which leads me to a second problem that I'd like to cover. It's lost knowledge and poor transparency to what people are actually working on. And this usually happens because of one-on-one and other individual chats. Well, I'm not saying that one-on-one chats are evil. They are in fact very useful if you need to solve a problem quickly. I use them all the time myself. But the way it usually works is that a person works on a task or a problem and he or she reaches another person in your team. They work on it together. Sometimes they need to add someone else and sometimes even some more people, and this ends up growing like a side group conversation. And as I said, usually it's a completely normal thing. It's great to have knowledgeable people in your team, especially those who help out each other like that. But what happens if they're gonna leave your team or even your company? How would you get access to that information? Are you sure that your team members are able to focus on their own work rather than being interrupted by their teammates asking for help? And again, I'm not saying that we should ban one-on-one chats completely. If you start controlling every single move or messages that your team members send, it's soon going to turn into a disaster, trust me. But what I'm saying is that as project managers, we could build better processes and tools for them to communicate more efficiently. Last but not least, security and compliance. It's easy to forget that it's actually your organization who owns information that you and your team members are exchanging. Sometimes even goes beyond that. It can be your client's intellectual property or people's health information, for example. And as someone who had to work with both, may I tell you how many legal aspects they are. If you or your team members are going to lose that sensitive information, well, let's say a lot of unpleasant legal events may happen to you and your company, but let's not do that. Let's avoid that. The way it usually works is that your team members simply do not like the way Skype for Business works. And trust me, I'm there with you. But what happens is that they just go and install some side application, if I may call it that. For example, they like Slack or regular Skype, and they install it and they start using their personal credentials for corporate communications. And this is something that should be absolutely restricted. And unfortunately, I keep seeing that in different companies, in different organizations, these kind of things are still happening. And it always surprises me. It always amazes me how it is still possible nowadays when everyone talks about security, compliance. GDPR is a big thing these days, and it still happens. It's so sad. Don't do that. So what's interesting here is that when the team members do not want to receive notifications and messages for the problems and questions, announcements that are not related to their function or their tasks to be able to concentrate on their own work, it might seem that as a project manager, I want the opposite. Because I want an instant messaging group for the whole team to have a visibility on who's working on what and be able to interfere if necessary, meaning help out, coordinate, reprioritize. I also want to have everyone reachable in that single place because I want to accumulate knowledge, let's say on problem-solving paths taken by the team in a single place. This information can further be documented in lessons learned or other product documents depending on its nature. But anyway, what to do with this information is another topic that lays under knowledge management process. I also want to be able to organize one-to-many communications for announcements, etc. And as I said, I want to comply with security requirements. Now let's take a look at the project team structure. This is a real-life example of one of my recent projects. As you can see, our team consists of people of different functions. We have a development team, creative, business analysis, a UX designer, and DevOps engineer. This is a pretty standard team composition for IT project. I have created a private team in Microsoft Teams using my corporate credentials here. And I've generated some messages for you. Obviously, this is not a real-life channel I have here. This was just created for education purposes for this demo specifically. And that's why you will see that most of the messages are created by me. I just wanted to show you what it looks like on our project. Now you can see that I selected private team over public, and the reason is because in our organization we are not allowed to share information on the project unless the person that we're sharing it with is assigned to that project. And if I would go with public, then everyone in my organization would have access to it. Well, you can also go with public in case if the nature of your project is a bit different than mine. For example, we had this volunteering project in our organization organizing recycling locations among different offices, and our goal was actually to engage people across our organization into this activity. And that's why we went with public, and this team was searchable. People could share links and other people could be added into this team automatically just by following the links. Now, if you are new to this app, this channel that appears by default and called General is something that never goes away. You can't remove it, you can't rename it, meaning that everyone in your team are meant to be notified about what's going on in this channel. That's why the last thing you want to do is use it for topics that don't concern the whole team. I personally only use it for announcements when someone is joining or leaving the team, or maybe to congratulate and thank the team for another successful production release. Notice that messages in Microsoft Teams are grouped by topics. That way everything is organized by different threads, just like in Outlook or a forum. You can create more channels like I did here, depending on the project needs, etc. And this is something that we will go through in a few. What I'd like to do next is create separate channels for functional teams. I've already showed you that we have testers, and here you can see that I've created team QA. We have developers for whom I created team dev here, and business analysts, etc. Each one of these is kind of a team within a team. We sometimes call them sub-teams, and we often need to address the whole functional sub-team. For example, if a user discovers a potential bug which was communicated to us by support team, we'd like our QA team to verify that and confirm. You can just type in team QA, we have a new problem reported by users, and etc. And I post this in here. So I'm asking whoever is available at the moment to take a look. And the beauty of this is that only people who are subscribed to this channel, which in my case testers only, are receiving this message now. But let's say investigation of this user problem needs some help from BA team. What QA can do is simply address team BA right here in QA channel and pull them to conversation. BA team is going to be notified, so again, whoever is available from BA team will answer the question and good to go. The cool thing about this is that QAs didn't have to repost this problem, this whole thread with a problem description into Team BA channel, wasting their time. They just pull them directly into the conversation by simply mentioning them. You can see how awesome it is to have everyone reachable, but at the same time limiting notifications like that. As you can see, I didn't create separate functional channels for UX designer and for DevOps engineer. The reason is because I only have a single person for each of these roles. But the truth is that I would still recommend to create these channels. For example, if there is UX design related topic that people want to ask a question on, it's better that they do it in this separate channel rather than texting that person directly, because that way in this channel you will be accumulating all these messages in that single place, and if this person rolls off and the new one comes in, he or she will be able to pick up where the other one left off. At the beginning of this video, I announced that I will show you these examples in Slack and Microsoft Teams both, but unfortunately this video is already 18 minutes long and I want to keep it shorter. So you can see I've created channels the same way I did in Microsoft Teams. Here in Slack I created Team BA, Team QA, and it's basically pretty much the same. That's why I don't think you will have problems figuring this out on your own. And you are probably saying, hey, but sometimes people are grouped into sub-teams not by function, but by a feature or some other deliverable that they work on together, basically by a task. We also have these major deliverables where people of different functions need to group into teams for some time and work on them together. For example, in our case, we have this feature that only planning took 3 months for, and now it's in implementation phase, which will take 3 to 6 months. That's why we created a separate channel in Microsoft Teams where all the people who are assigned to a specific deliverable can work on things together. They organize meetings in this channel, they raise questions or problems over there, and they discuss them all together. And to be honest, I'm not even subscribed because there's so many notifications, and I also have other deliverables, other streams to focus on, but I still check on daily basis, of course, seeing how are they doing. And the cool thing about it is that I'm not receiving all the notifications that distract me during the day, and instead I'm just going there when I have time and I'm ready to process the information and go through all the messages that they accumulated to see how are they doing, if they are on track, who's working on what, if they have problems, do I need to help out, and so on. And at the same time, if there was something urgent that needed my attention, they could simply pull me by name into the thread and I will see it immediately. So you can see how beneficial it is to have separate channels for these major feature deliverables, for example. But it doesn't have to be some new development. It can be something very operational like support, for example. So in our case, in addition to delivering new features to the application, we are also doing support for it, and we have this on-call schedule. In case if you didn't know, it's when people agree on who is taking care of support this week or this week and so on, and we do this for developers because they don't like to do support, they prefer doing new features. And let's say this week developer A is on call, the next week it's developer B, and so on, and then they start over. So the point is that people who doing support, meaning working directly with users, they don't have to remember who is on call this week. They just go to this support channel, they post a message with whatever problem they need help with, and whoever is on call this week is taking over. So this just saves some time to people because they don't have to memorize who is on call this week and who is on call this week. People know their schedule, and whoever is doing support doesn't have to memorize all that. They just post their message and it's taken care of. So you can see how beneficial it is to have separate channels for some features or operational activities, but at the same time, don't get too crazy creating them because it will be difficult for your team to navigate across them. As I said, in my case, for this feature channel, it took several months for that thing to be implemented. That's why it kind of made sense, but I wouldn't do it for smaller things that take several weeks or maybe a couple of months of work. Another thing I mentioned as something that I like to have in instant messaging tool as a project manager is one-to-many communications. I understand that it's a bit unusual because some of these things could be done through Outlook, like you could send an email informing your team about things that changed, but I find instant messaging to be a better fit for my case. And here is why. So we function in an agile world. That's why our schedule changes all the time. It changes very frequently. Sometimes it changes every other week and even every other day within a week, because there's so many dependencies, other systems that can also do some activities that may affect us, and we have to be aligned with all of them, as well as our own production releases and so on. So in order for the team to be informed, even though we have this separate Confluence page with the schedule described, I wanted to have a separate place where I could send push notifications that they would read for sure, and they were aware of what's coming this week or next week and so on. That's why I simply created this separate channel in Microsoft Teams, where I restricted posting to only team owners, which is myself and my manager, so that if there are some changes in our schedule, I would simply post this slide in there and everyone were aware. That was very useful. At the same time, if let's say we signed a new contract for the next phase with the client, I would like to inform the rest of the team about what are the objectives and the scope of this contract, in case if it was changed, for example. Because if people are aware of your project's goals and objectives, they are able to prioritize their own work better. So another example of one-to-many communications I have would be changes to our processes and procedures. Let's say, hey guys, we used to be doing sprints like that, but starting next week we will be doing them like that. Or hey, due to coronavirus quarantine, please make sure that your VPN is up and running. Here are the new instructions. By the way, they are updated. Please make sure that you have the new link and everything is working. I find that through Microsoft Teams, it's working better rather than sending these things through Outlook, because I receive feedback from people. I mean, they put thumbs up on the post, letting me know that they read it and they understood it. And if they have questions, they post a comment underneath clarifying things. And so Microsoft Teams is a little bit more interactive, and you simply get more feedback. Another thing to mention is that if there are some things that you're doing manually, you could use Microsoft Teams to automate it. For example, create a bot with a reminder or something else. In our case, we use the integrational features of Microsoft Teams, and there's so many of them, so I'm not even gonna get started about how powerful that tool is in terms of integration with other applications. But in our case, we use integration with Jenkins, so whenever the new application version build was prepared and deployed to one of the environments, it was sending these push notifications. So let's say if a business analyst wanted to make sure that this feature is on staging or on QA environment because he or she needs to test it right now or check some data, they didn't have to go and ask developers and who would have go and checked which version is on this environment. They could simply go into this channel and see what are the latest notifications, what was the latest version deployed to that environment. We found it very useful. So before I wrap up this video, I like to share one last tip. I find it very useful to separate fun stuff from your general communications, because the last thing you want is for your team member who just had an idea on how to solve this problem be interrupted about another joke on how one of the countries ran out of toilet paper during coronavirus crisis, right? So keep that in mind. If you have pizza parties and so on, you want to have a separate channel for that kind of stuff, so that people could unsubscribe and stop receiving notifications during the day and nothing distracted them from their tasks and their work. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. This is actually my very first video on YouTube, so I'm pretty nervous about it. And I'm finding that a lot of things I'm sharing in this video are very obvious, and the only reason I'm making this video, honestly, is because I still see a lot of people who are not utilizing all this powerful stuff about new instant messaging applications, and I felt like I need to share this. So please let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this in the comments below. Subscribe, thumbs up, and all the good stuff. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.